Welcome to the Today Show. I'm your host, Jay Stoyan. You're in for a special presentation. I want to say hi to our Facebook friends as this show is live on Facebook. So we're looking for comments. We want to interact. We want to answer your questions. So again, you're watching a special presentation of the Today Show today as we have a very special guest and we're going to go completely off the rails today. So today on the show, we have this guy is super famous too. Like, we're really excited. We have on Ron Chepesiuk. He is an exciting guy. He's a true crime beat reporter. He's a journalist and he's a screenwriter. This guy's going to knock your socks off with the people he's interviewed and the stories that he's told. So again, we're really excited today for a special presentation. We have on journalist, screenwriter, Ron Chepesiuk. Before we go to commercial break, I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Lori. She's at a summit today. This lady does amazing things. You got to check her out. Well, you can check out her show. She's my co-host on a Today Show. So right now, she's turning the world on fire out in Alberta with her platform, all about self-worth, self-help, dignity, confidence, employment, finance. Wonderful lady. So I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Lori, all of her friends, all of her associates out there. She's doing wonderful. She'll be back on the show Monday. So I jumped in. I'm going to do a special presentation. Before we take a commercial break and introduce our guest, Ron, I just wanted to let people know a couple updates quickly. 50/50, constantly going courtesy of the Veteran House charity. Make sure you get your tickets. They're on our website. We do have our next fundraiser locked in. This is going to be really exciting because there's lots of elements we're adding to this one. So October 12th at Kerrigan Arms out in Burlington. This is a free event. So reserve your seats early because you know who's playing Freedom Train and they pack the house. So this is a free event, right? In honor of our veterans. We're going to showcase our employment programs. We're going to showcase our heroes. We're big on donations. This is a free event, so we are asking people to show your kindness, show your generosity. All your donations will go to a great cause, veteran program, so they can get employed and get a job and continue on with their fantastic life. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank RBC. RBC is going to be stepping up for the channel, so thank you. Thank you, RBC. Very exciting. Of course, the Ontario government and the federal government supports us. I want to make a big shout out to our premier, Doug Ford. Canadian Media Fund. You're going to be hearing more about these people. We got so much going on. So you know what? I could go on and on and on. But yeah, October 12th. Keep that. I want to give a big shout out to K-Dog, generosity and kindness. Wow, to the max. So K-Dog, thank you so much for this. We'll give you more details on October 12th. But right now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to come back with our journalist, an award-winning screenwriter, Ron Chepesiuk. So stay tuned. You'll be right back. You're watching the Today Show. I'm Jay Stoyan. Welcome back to the show. On the show today, we're really excited as we have journalist, award-winning screenwriter. We have Ron Chepesiuk. Ron, thanks for being on the show today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Jay.
This is great. Tell our fans and our people where you're calling in from, Ron.
I'm calling in from Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's a little hamlet outside of Charlotte. It's about 20 miles from Charlotte. But I have to tell you, I'm Canadian, by the way. I'm from Thunder Bay. I'm from Thunder Bay. I'm very proud of that. And I've been living most of my life in the U.S., but I still have my heart in Thunder Bay.
Well, that's great. I love that a fellow Canadian writing about something that I also love about true crime fiction, all about the streets. So before we get into that, Ron, maybe tell our viewers a little bit of your background. You know, like you said, you grew up in Thunder Bay. I mean, just like a short sort of overview, and then we'll get into your exciting career.
Well, it's been a meandering career. I grew up in Thunder Bay. I left when I was 19 years old, went to college in the United States, University of Minnesota at Moorhead. And, I'm a product of the 60s. So the Vietnam War and all that sort of stuff. And I was sort of drifting along. And one day when I was like 28 years old, I decided I got to make something of my career, because I was just working all kinds of really crappy jobs. And so I decided I was going to be a librarian. I was either going to be a journalist or a librarian, but I'd never written anything in my life. So I said, I'll take the safe route. So I decided to become a librarian. I went to library school and graduated from there and
Okay,
ended
hold
up,
on, hold on. You went to library school.
yeah,
What is that?
library school. That's getting your master's degree in librarianship. It's like getting a master's in history or a master's in poli sci. It's so I was credentialed, which meant that I could work as a librarian, accredited librarian. So I ended up in Rock Hill and at this university, and I developed a manuscript collection of really interesting documents. The school was a women's college until '74, and so I developed this women's collection, and I was going along okay, and I was really excited about my career and all that. And then I got a sabbatical to Ireland, and yeah, Ireland's really an amazing country. The Irish can talk your head off, but they can't fix anything. And I ended up one day just sitting there in a bar. I remember distinctly. I said, "I'm going to be a writer." I just
Really?
decided, yeah, I decided. I had never. I said I always wanted to be a writer, but I'm never going to talk about it until I started writing, because I knew a
So
lot of people that ended up saying, "Oh, I'm a writer," but they never written anything.
what took you to Ireland?
Sabbatical. I After
Just
7 years, I got a sabbatical from the university, and I went and studied for a graduate diploma at the National University of Ireland.
wow.
That's Jimmy Joyce, James Joyce's university. I'm very proud of it. So
Yeah.
I ended up there spending a year, and near the end of it, that's when I decided to become a writer. So I sat down, and uh, there was this library called the Chester Beatty Library, and I wrote an article about it and sent it off to a library publication. I got published. I was excited and all that. So I said when I came back to the U.S., I was going to spend my free time developing my career as a writer. And I got rejected, and finally I ended up selling this piece on as a profile of this really famous historian, African American historian named John Hope Franklin. And it was I sold it in Modern Maturity, which at the time was the biggest magazine in the world, and it was for retired people, and that gave me a lot of confidence. And then I developed this career as a magazine writer, and I ended up selling 4,000 magazine articles.
So let's fast forward just a little bit. And how did you fall into the crime genre?
Well, it was really weird because I ended up on a junket, press junket. Colombia in the late 1980s uh, had a really bad reputation because of Escobar. Remember him, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The famous criminal, right? And so they set up this junket to invite journalists to come to Colombia to write about Colombia and hopefully improve their image. So I ended up going to Colombia, and on the last day that I was there, I met a woman who became my wife. And
Wow.
I had a date with her, and so I started this correspondence with her. And being the practical guy I was going to write about things while I was there. So I ended up covering the Colombian drug war with Escobar took on the state. So I started writing a whole bunch of articles for that. And then so that started my reputation as a sort of a crime writer. But then I decided to write a book about the Cali cartel because Escobar was really well covered. The Medellin cartel, which he headed, was well written about, but nobody knew anything about the Cali cartel. So I ended
So
up writing.
let me ask you this then. So what did you find do you think you found your niche, or it was just a paycheck at the time?
Well, yeah, I was making a lot of money. I was able to retire early from the job because of the money I was making. Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I mean,
Nice.
I was fascinated by Colombia. It was just an incredible country, and it was going through all kinds of stress because of Escobar and the drug war and all that. And I'm a very practical guy. I decided to write about something that nobody had written about and that I could access.
And
So I ended
that would have been back in the 80s, right? I guess.
this is about 95.
About 95 now.
Yeah,
Okay.
95.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Escobar died in 93.
Is that when he died in 93? But he was in the late 80s when he was like
Yeah.
causing
Right.
havoc.
I was there in the late 80s. I met my wife in 87.
Okay.
And we got married in 88. And so I ended up covering that. And then I got the book done, and it was pretty well received. And I said, well, what am I going to do now? And at that time I had left my job at the university, and I was writing full time. And I said, well, I know something about crime. So I remember when I was at the university in Atlanta getting my master's, I became hooked on the blaxploitation movies.
Yeah.
The Superfly, Black Caesar, all these movies. And I said, I'm going to write a book about that. And I went back and did some research, and I said, oh, wow, this is really interesting. Harlem has all these gangsters, and nobody had anything about it. So I did a book called Gangsters of Harlem. And the book was well received. I started to get on cable networks, as a sort of a historian. And from there, next book I did was Black Gangsters of Chicago. And then I did that book, and I did Gangsters of Miami. And so by that time, I was a crime historian. People.
Well, let's talk about some of the names. Like I wrote down, you got such an extensive career that you've interviewed basically or wrote about everybody, interviewed everybody. So I'm just going to throw out some names and tell me your point of view. Tell me what your memory about them, or something like that. So let's start with, let's just say Frank Matthews. Tell people who Frank Matthews is, and tell me your point of view on Frank, sort of thing.
I call Frank Matthews the Al Capone of black gangsters. He was the first big independent black gangster. Not many people know about him, but he operated from about 68 to about 73. In 1973, July 2nd, he left the courthouse. He was being arraigned for criminal activity, and he disappeared. And he's never been seen since. There's never been no pictures of him. There's been no snitches that talked about him. Nothing.
Who was his alleged handler? Who was his alleged handler, Frank Matthews?
What do you mean?
Who did he report to?
Oh, he didn't report to anybody. He was a big honcho. You hear about these guys like Frank Lucas, right, and Nicky Barnes.
Yeah.
They were small time compared to Frank Matthews.
Now, which one of the gangsters, tell our viewers, hid the illicit drugs in the coffins coming home?
Well, that's Frank Lucas, and I interviewed him for my book on Gangsters of Harlem, and he kept referring to, quote, his cousin, who's not really his cousin, but he kept referring to him as Ike Atkinson. And I to myself, who is this Ike Atkinson? I mean, he was talking about him. And if you remember the movie American Gangster, there was a character in there called Nate. He always walked around with the uniform. Well, that was modeled on Ike Atkinson. So, anyways, I went on the internet and I looked up, and I found out Ike Atkinson was in prison in Butner Prison in North Carolina, and he's been in prison for like 32 years, on that. And I said, God, and I looked. There was no book on him. I said, I wonder if this guy would be interested in doing a book. So I wrote him a letter. I got his address. I wrote him a letter to the prison, and he answered me, and he said, yeah, I want to see you. And so I came to see him at Butner, and we hit it off. And he said, when I get out in about a year, I said, would you be interested in working on a book with me about my life? I said, sure, on that then. So that started off my book, Sergeant Smack.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? And when I come back, I want you to link up three names: Frank Matthews, Frank Lucas, and Nicky Barnes. But stay tuned. Yeah. On the show today, we have journalist, screenwriter, award-winning screenwriter, and crime beat reporter. We have Ron Chepesiuk. Wow, this is a great show. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're going to get knee-deep into the true crime world. I'm Jay Stoyan. You're watching the Today Show. a disability channel showcasing abilities. Welcome back to the show. On the show today, we have journalist, screenwriter, we have Ron Chepesiuk. Ron, thanks for being on the show today. So before you left, we were just talking about the Harlem Gangsters and all the famous names. So for our viewers, in a brief way, link up Frank Matthews, Frank Lucas, and Nicky Barnes, because the last two names are super popular because of the television and all that, right?
Right. Nicky, yeah, right. Nicky Barnes. Well, there are three gangsters that essentially operated in the late 60s and early 70s. Up until that time, the French Connection, you heard about the famous French Connection, was actually mafia controlled. It was controlled by the Italian mafia and all that. And the authorities were having great success against the French Connection, and they were breaking up. And this opened up opportunities for black gangsters at the time. And so you saw the emergence of independent black gangsters. Before this time, they operated solely at the behest of the Italian mafia, but they started to develop their own networks and all that. Frank Matthews had connections in 21 states. Nicky Barnes became famous. They were trying to arrest him, and he was playing games with them. And then he had Frank Lucas, who was the third guy that came out, and all three of them operated at the time. And wasn't
it Frank Lucas who showed up to the Joe Frazier Muhammad Ali fight with a big fur coat?
Well, they all did. They all loved boxing, and they would show up in their chinchilla coats, the famous coats, and with the hats and all that. And that was part of their downfall.
But that's when he got recognized. They're saying,
right.
They got recognized.
Right.
Yeah.
And they became very prominent and easy targets for law enforcement. And my philosophy is don't be a criminal because you're going to get caught. I could count the number of criminals that have gotten away with it on one hand.
So let's talk about this, Ron. So I know obviously like you're super famous. You've talked to, you've interviewed the biggest gangsters in the world. You're award winning. So tell us how, and then we'll get into more of your career because there's so much to talk about. Tell us how you sort of made the jump into the television world now. How did that happen? Like start writing for TV and movies and stuff like that.
Well, it's just a natural progression, slowly but surely, I just developed a career. And like I said, all these documentaries started to show up in the 2000s on gangsters, all these stations, Discovery Channel, ID, History, Biography. I've been on all of them. Started to develop these crime shows. And they're very popular. And, when you're a producer, you're looking for people that can talk about it. You go to Amazon to see what books have been written about it. And my books were there. And so I got called. And then somebody sees me at one show. And then another person says, okay, that guy, I want him on my show. And so it just developed naturally, progression. And right now I'm working on, I was in Colombia a couple of days ago for 2 weeks. And I'm working on a documentary for a major cable network on one of the gangsters I wrote about, a guy named Jesus Ruiz Henao. He's called the Real Mr. Big, and he was the biggest cocaine dealer ever in Britain. And they call him the first billion-pound kingpin in England. And so I started, I got that, and I just, naturally developed into a so-called expert. I mean, I didn't know I'm an expert, but people thought I was an expert, and that's how I got to the point where I started to appear on various television stations.
Can you share with us or our viewers some of the big productions or some of the big production studios or labels or name brands that people go, oh yeah, like. You know what I mean? I know, like, for instance, Warner Brothers or Sony or, stuff like that. Like,
well, I mean, all the cable networks, you name them.
Really?
I mean, Biography, National Geographic, the Discovery Channel, ID Channel, History
So,
Channel.
so what would they do? Take us through a scenario. So if someone was to call you, like a producer from one of these networks, and they got a new project that they're sort of developing, would they call you and say, "Hey, Ron, we got this new crime project. We'd love to hire you on as a writer or an expert or as a consultant or something like that?" How it works, kind of thing, or you
Yeah,
tell us how it works?
that's what happens. I get an email in my box saying I'm with a social specific production company,
Yep.
and we're doing this or that, and then would you be interested in being a talking head on the show? And then I have a sort of a manager, and I refer them to the manager, and the manager talks with them, and they work out a sort of a deal, and then they come to me and say, okay, this is what we want you to do, and end up you know being on television. I'm probably on television like once a week. Somebody will email me and say, "Hey, I saw you on television," and I said, "What channel was it?" And they tell it what it was, and it was some show I did about 10 years ago, a documentary, and I would end up in the show.
This is great. I love it. Like I have a list here. So let's add this couple names I'm going to throw out there. Like I can't believe I have him on my list. Arafat. Like, tell me your experience with Arafat. Like, oh my God, like Yasser Arafat.
Well,
Like,
it's really ironic because when I went to God, I was in the Gaza Strip.
okay.
This was '97, and you know what happened to the Gaza Strip now, right? It's a
Yeah,
complete
yeah,
mess. There's like
yeah,
35,000 deaths.
yeah.
And I went as a consultant to the PLO on the construction of what they were hoping would be a national library, because at that time there was really optimism that peace was going to come. And so I ended up going there, and it was really funny because at that time the PLO was the dominant faction in the Middle East, and Hamas at that time was very small, and ended up in Gaza City and talking with a lot of these Hamas guys, and they were like small time. It wasn't until about '85 before they took power on that sort of stuff. And then about a year after I left, I was going to come back for the National Library dedication. That's how close they were to peace then.
Wow.
And about a year after that, there was some kind of incident along in Jerusalem, and it just set off a conflagration. And the next thing you know, they're at war to each other.
And they're
And it's
dragging
been
them through
that
the
way.
streets, right? They're dragging
Right.
them through the streets.
Right. It's been
How
that way
so?
ever
So
since.
how long before they were dragging him through the streets were you interacting with him? How many years? 2 years? 3 years?
No, but it was about a year,
About a
2
year?
years,
About
right?
2
And
years?
that, yeah, we actually did a report for them. I went with another librarian, and we did a report. And we said this is what your national library should look like, and we sent it to them. It was 32 pages, and I ended up interviewing Arafat. It was really funny because I didn't think we would get him because he was so busy. Everything
Sure.
flowed through Arafat. And then the last day we were there, he was in three countries, and he was ending up with Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State for the U.S.
Yep.
In Geneva. And we said, there's no way he's going to make it back. So we're going to have the interview with him. But anyways, one of his handlers said, go and just wait for us to call you. And we said, sure. So we went to the bed, and I was falling asleep, and I heard this banging. Someone said, wake up, the chairman is here. And
Wow.
we were dressed in our suits, because we were ready to go and all that. So we jumped up, and Robbie Sharma was my partner on this project, and we said, let's go. So we jumped in the limousine, and the next thing you know, you remember Walter Cronkite?
Yep.
That famous, when every time he had Arafat, he was in that one room. It always looked the same. It was exactly the same room, and we were in there, and we couldn't believe it. Next thing you know, we're standing there. Arafat's right in front of us. He came in. He was a little tiny guy, and the thing I noticed, he was shaking. His hand was shaking. It was like that famous picture of Adolf Hitler. You remember?
Yeah.
Where those young kids. It was the same sort of thing. And we found out later he had that cerebral palsy on that. But you never know that because he hid it from the cameras on that. So we sat down with him, and we had prepared an interview that we're gonna we had questions, and we were gonna hit him back and forth and all that. We were prepared for an hour with them. We thought we'd get 45 minutes, which is a lot of time with a person that important.
Sure.
And we ended up 15 minutes.
That's it.
Because
Hey, you're done.
his answers were so short. And I realized the problem, while the Israelis are always getting the better of the Palestinians, is that everything ran through Arafat, but he couldn't speak English. He wasn't a very good communicator on that then. And that's why they always lost the battle of communication on that sort of thing. Right. And so anyways, we ended up with the interview. I wrote an article, and I got some great pictures, of Arafat.
Now, were you an independent reporter there, or you were with an outfit?
Well, I was a librarian at the time, actually.
You're a librarian. Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, I was a librarian. Yeah, but I mean, I'm a reporter. Robbie was Sharma was a reporter, journalist, librarian too.
Yeah, like you weren't with NBC or ABC at the time or nothing like that, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. How about give me some reference to Chomsky?
Chomsky. We ended up. He ended up. I got a radio podcast called Crime Beat.
Yeah.
With Ron Chepesiuk, and it's been on the air since 2011. And we ended up interviewing Chomsky twice for the Crime Beat show on that. And I think I asked him. Our show's an hour long, and I think I asked him 8 questions in an hour because he was a typical professor. He would give these answers, and you don't want to interrupt him because it's Noam Chomsky, right? On that sort of stuff. And he's a little bit older now, and he's sort of semi-retired, so you don't see him at all. And so we ended up interviewing. People want to listen to the interview. They could go to my website, Crime Beat. On
let's do this. My producer's yelling in my ear. We got to take another break. When we come back, I want to sort of move it forward to today and just get your opinion on the different factions of the true crime world. So stay tuned. You're watching the Today Show. On the show today, we have a special presentation. We have journalist, screenwriter. We have Ron Chepesiuk. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with the Today Show.
Friends, it's an absolute pleasure to send greetings as you gather for this fantastic fundraiser in support of the Disability Channel and Legion 60. Thanks to everyone involved for the important work you do for our veterans and people with disabilities. You're supporting them as they gain valuable work experience and helping build a stronger Ontario for everyone. You're all absolute champions. Your generosity is greatly appreciated, and I hope you have a fantastic event.
Hey, I'm Tiger Williams, and you're watching the Disability Channel, and support Easter sales all year round, and thank you very much.
Welcome back to the show. On the show today, we have journalist, screenwriter. We have Ron Chepesiuk. So, Ron, we're going to move it ahead to today because you have such an extensive career in writing on crime. I just wanted to get your feeling on today's state of crime. Maybe talk a little bit about the 5 families. Talk a little bit about the outfit or the lack of outfit in Chicago. Talk a little bit about the bikers and anything else that you want to bring up. Like, what's your view on the underworld today?
There'll always be an underworld. As long as you have humanity, you're going to have crime on that end. And the only thing is that the characters change, but the criminal activity still stays the same on that sort of stuff. I don't know. The mafia today is not as big as they were back 30, 40 years ago. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the young people, don't want to get involved, don't want to obey the code, and there's really no continuity. I think in the mafia like there used to be with the mafia, and it's degenerated, now, and of course law enforcement with the RICO Act.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
right, has decimated the mafia.
Well, I think it was on Joey Marlino before he got banned, before his podcast got told to stop doing it. But I think they said, guys were willing to do 5, 6, 7 years, right? They're willing to do that. Yeah. But when you attach the RICO, it's 25 years or life. Guys won't do that, right? So who do you think is the strongest family right now out of New York? Who would you? And again, it's just your personal opinion and.
I don't know. The Gambino or the Genovese probably.
Probably
On that
Genovese,
sort of
I
thing.
think.
It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to know. To pick a crime family on
Yeah.
that. But there's 5 of them. So with the exception of the Colombo family, probably the Genovese or the Gambinos would be my choice as a family. Of course, the reason you're talking about them is because they got the name.
That's
The
right.
Italian mafia, right? I mean, but I mean, they're not as, like I said, not as powerful, not as strong, and don't have as much influence as they once did.
And then, of course, now you have the 1%ers, right? The bikers. Now they've sort of jumped
Yeah,
up
you hear a lot about the bikers. I've been approached by a couple of bikers about doing their story, but nothing's worked out on that sort of thing. But yeah, the Hells Angels,
Yeah.
the Outlaws, especially in Canada, right?
Oh, up here in Montreal, it's
In
a
Montreal,
barn burner.
they're really big on
It's a
that sort
barn
of
burner.
thing, right?
We could
But I
talk
mean,
more. We could talk so much about that. Let me ask you one more thing, and then I think we're gonna head out. But so, if people want to find out more information, Ron, where could they go? Give out your website, your podcast. If people want to look into you, hire you, just talk to you, maybe be a guest on your show, where could they go, Ron?
Well, I've got a website. It's
Okay.
www.ronchepesiuk.com. And they can go there. They can go to my Facebook page. I'm very active on Facebook, and hook up as a friend. Mention your show, because I get a lot of people. I don't know, you can't really trust a lot of the people. So mention that you heard me on the show, and then I'll friend you. And,
There you go.
And you can follow on that sort of thing. You can go to my Crime Beat show, and you could hook up. Crime Beat 123 at yahoo.com is the email address on that then. But there's a lot of ways that you can connect to me if you want.
I'm not letting you go yet. I'm not letting you go. I still got a few names I want to talk to you about. Like, give me your take on the Traficantes now. Give me your take on those guys.
Well, they were really big. I mean, out of Tampa, Florida, I did a book called The Traficantes, which actually probably my best-selling book, which is really surprising on that. And the big question is, did they have anything to do with John F. Kennedy's?
I was just going to ask you that. What do you think? What do you think?
Well, I'm not a conspiracy person. I hate conspiracies, because you got QAnon and all that kind of crap today. And but if there is a conspiracy that might have legitimacy, I think it might be the Kennedy assassination.
Like the Bay of Pigs and all
a
that
lot
stuff.
A lot of questions about that assassination. And a good friend of mine, Gerald Posner, wrote the book on the Kennedy assassination, saying that Oswald did it alone. And I don't think he'd be too happy hearing me talk about.
Well, wasn't Conte, like he was like, they were really tight with the outfit out of Chicago with big Tony Arcardo, the big two.
Yeah, right. Arcardo, right.
And his Sam Giancana and all those guys, right? So I think you're on to something there. But again, you really don't know. Let me give you another name. How about Holyfield? Give me your take on Holyfield. We interviewed Holyfield at the Super Bowl a couple years ago.
Right. Holyfield, in my opinion, I've probably interviewed maybe 16,000 people in my life. He's probably the nicest guy I've ever interviewed. And I spent a day with him in the early 90s before he was supposed to fight Tyson, right?
Yeah.
He was training for the fight. I had a assignment from a magazine, a men's magazine, and I went up there. He picked me up at the airport. He drove me to the airport with him because he was leaving. He's living in Atlanta at the time, but he was training in Houston.
Okay.
And he told me exactly how he would beat Tyson. He said that Tyson would come at him like with a fury, and he would try to bully him. And he said once that fury subsided, he would take over the fight and knock him out. And I looked at Holyfield. He was smaller than me, and he was training without weights. He was swimming and just working with calisthenics. It was really weird. And I said, "There's no way this guy is going to knock off Tyson." And then Tyson went to jail. Remember that with the woman. And then a couple of years later, after that, he fought him and he beat him. And he told me exactly how he was going to beat him.
It's so funny that you said he's such a nice guy, because I had the same experience. I've interviewed the Canadian champ, George Chevalo, a couple of times.
Oh, George Chevalo, yeah.
Right? George was in my studio, and he was just the nicest man and really humble. And another gentleman, like you said, that it's so funny that the bigger the star they are, the nicer the person they are. Not all the time. Like, for instance, I interviewed Frank Sinatra Jr. and I could just feel his dad's aura, right? The power of his dad, but he was so humble and just really gave me some great advice. So I'm sure you're in the same boat with some people that you think, oh my, like, give me some of the big names that you've interviewed, Ron. Like Holyfield, that's a huge name. Arafat, that's a huge name.
Yeah, Arafat, right. I've interviewed 3 presidents of Colombia, for example. I interviewed Ernesto Samper, who I call the Richard Nixon of Colombian politics.
Tell me about RFK.
RFK?
Yeah. Did you? I saw
RFK. Oh, you mean the interview on my Crime Beat show? Yeah. I interviewed him. He did a book on his nephew, about how his nephew was innocent. His nephew got nailed for a crime, and so he came on. He didn't really talk about anything political, but the book is actually quite good. It was written really well. I assume he wrote it himself, that he didn't have a ghostwriter and all that sort of stuff on that then. But he came on the show. We talked for half an hour. He wasn't famous back. This was like maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
On that, and he didn't have any political aspirations at the time on that then. And so I didn't get a chance to talk to him. He's had some weird views, as we know about that. He's a conspiracy nut.
He's done a lot of great things for the environment, though, right?
Yeah.
He's a very intelligent man, but like you said, he has his own views. But he's I mean, I don't really have a point of view of him. Whatever. He's a Kennedy, right? So I mean, I don't know. He's a Kennedy. I don't know.
Yeah, on that. Yeah, and he's in trouble with his family.
Yeah.
They're all Biden supporters, and they don't want him to run because they think he's going to interfere in the election and take votes away from. I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him on that sort of thing. But yeah, I got a chance to talk to him, and it was quite interesting. The book and all that, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him about politics.
No. Well, that's great, Ron. I really appreciate you for being on the show today. Hopefully, we're going to be having you on a lot more in the near future. We got some things cooking behind the scenes. We'll just leave it for that for now. But again, if people want to find out more about your career, Ron, give out your website, or where could they go?
www.ronchepesiuk.com. You go to my Crime Beat show at artistfirst.com and look for the Crime Beat section of the website. And you can follow me on Facebook. I'm very active on Facebook, and just mention that you heard me on the show, and I will friend you.
Well, that's great, Ron. I really appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your great career, and we'll be in touch. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back and wrap the show with a couple more updates. I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. We had a great show, special presentation with world famous writer and journalist Ron Chepesiuk. So, Ron, thanks again. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with the Today Show.
All about inclusion and really giving everyone a fair say.
Welcome to the Today Show. This is our flagship show. I am Unstoppable Tracy.
I am Zach Damon.
It is a pleasure to be here. I am excited. What is up?
We have a great show today.
Jay Stoyan here for the Disability Channel, the world's only inclusive channel for and by persons with disabilities.
Get ready to be inspired, everyone.
We have people watching from all over the world, but also all over Ontario.
We also take a concerted attention in the veterans community.
In moments of stress and trauma, we can get a hold of ourselves.
To help make a difference for people with disabilities, to show people how to love themselves or their disability.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys having me, giving this platform for myself and other people with disabilities.
Thank you so much, folks, for joining us for this episode of the Disability Channel Detroit. Please tune in next time.
Okay, welcome back to the show. We're really excited. We really want to thank journalist, screenwriter Ron Chepesiuk for being on the show today. Tell us about all his illustrious career, writing about true crime, writing about the gangsters around the world. Whether you're a mobster, a biker, a drug lord, a street gang guy, you got to get in touch with Ron and he'll make you famous. Again, you're watching the Today Show. Before we go, I do want to just give a couple more updates. I want to give a big shout out to the Invictus Games and the veterans out there. There are heroes doing, what no one else wants to do. So big shout out to the Invictus Games. Canada is going to be hosting the games in British Columbia in 225 in February. We plan to be a big supporter of that. I want to give a big shout out to our veterans down in the USA, Project Die Hard and Brian Gibson. He's doing wonderful things, preventing suicide. Again, check them out, Project Die Hard. They got some great people involved, including Tim from Big Records. I want to give a big shout out to Mark. Great organization, great platform showcasing emerging, local, mainstream, independent artists. Check them out. I want to give a big shout out to Alware. Our programs, so our employment programs, they're ongoing. So if you guys want to sign up, employment programs in media, learn a new skill either in front of the camera or behind, get a job, get paid. Again, you're watching the Disability Channel and our flagship show, the Today Show. I'm Jay Stoyan. We'll see you next time.